Welcome back, everyone. So this is the second in our 3 video series of how to use the Chargeback app together with other capabilities in the platform like monitoring console and workload management to help you on your journey to a successful workload pricing adoption.
So let me walk you through how you actually set up the business hierarchy in the Chargeback app. So after you have installed the app and launch it for the first time, you'll see this page here. It would say Splunk App for Chargeback and the version that you installed. This dashboard here has tabs. As you can see, there's an overview tab. This is where you see the version that you installed, if there's a newer version or not, and the prerequisite apps, if you have them installed or not, and what version they are. In addition, this is where you actually enable the jobs and set up a couple of macros, configurable macros in there. At any point of time, if you have any need to understand any terminology or acronyms that you see in the app, you can always come in here and you'll see an explanation, and sometimes including a clickable URL to get some more information about this topic. So really, what we want to go after is basically first of all, we'll go to the enrichment table so I can explain to you how this works. So in here, we have multiple panels. The second one and the third one is what are the ones that we will be using to build the business hierarchy. And it really starts with the users, the foundation. And I just want to make sure you guys understand that this has two components to it. And I will explain it in a minute. So when you click on this, this is more like the ad hoc user table, right? So it will be more like service accounts or any corrections you want to make to the user information, etc. And then as you move to the right, it's more like the priority order, right? So this runs first. I still don't know where this usage is coming from. Maybe the user is a contractor, right? So we know the manager is an employee of your organization, so maybe we can use his or hers um, business information to tie that to the usage, right? So we can figure out what business unit and department we should tie that usage to. Now, when it goes to the third step will be roles. These are not the roles that you use to permission indexes. You have to be very careful here. This is more like, without a shadow of a doubt, this role only used by this team to log into Splunk, not to have access to an index or anything like that, but to have access to Splunk itself from a capability perspective, the type of user they are, etc. And then it goes to step 4, or priority 4 would be the apps, probably one of my favorites, because apps like a container, doesn't matter what user, doesn't matter what kind of search type being dispatched, even if it's a data model acceleration, it does a great job. Also in a situation where you want you want to do some work for a different business unit, as long as you launch the app that belongs to that business unit, you can all that usage will be associated with it. So, and again, you can actually shuffle these. And in a situation that happened last week, we had to actually make this the first one in a priority because a customer didn't have a great user database. So, and they had a scenario where they have kind of multi-tenancy, so they wanted flexibility in people going in and doing work for these tenants, right? So we pushed the app as the first one in the priority, so it became number 1. And I'll show you where you do that and what solved that problem. So really, you just want to use what you need here, and you sometimes even one row would be good enough, right? So you see the gear icon above each one of these 4 tables. You can just click on it. And like I said, this first one is a user database. I'm going to explain that a little detail because it's a little complicated Um, so this is where you can, if you want to use this for all your users, but I don't recommend that because we need to have some kind of automation because people may change, departments and business units. So we want to be careful about that. Most likely, I like to use it for like service accounts, kind of like that example here, but not for actual people. Now, where do you actually do that is right here in the app jobs. So you have like a 3 steps process, and that's documented. At any point in time, if you want to go to the documentation, you can click on this link here. It will take you to the doc, and I'll show you there what steps you need to follow. Here's you click on configure the Splunk App for Chargeback, and it walks you through the setup process, which is the setup screen, and where you configure the index if you want to use a different index. And then really this is what we're after here. It's configuring the custom identity data store, right? So that's really what we're after here with this 3 steps process. We need to figure out a source that has this information in it, right? It has information about the user, the username, their business unit, department, name and organization, their title, email address, manager ID would be great to have, right? So let me just show you an example, right? So if we open this up, this is more like the template job, right? That ships with the app, just to give you an idea what we're looking for. It gives you a little bit of instructions here, what we're looking for. These are the fields that we're gonna rename, right? So whatever your fields are that you have in your data store, and it could be something coming out of human capital management system like Oracle or Workday, which is the best source, by the way. Or it can be Remedy or ServiceNow, some type of CMDB. In some cases, it's custom, but really many times we find it in Active Directory. So that's why you have this search repository I'm going to show you here. This search repository you can use to actually find searches that pre-built, right? And so you can use them to build these principles. So for example, I'm going to come in here. I'm going to use this filter here, enrichment principle. I'm going to zoom in on the users to business unit, and I'm going to click submit. All right, and right here you can see the first one at the top is Microsoft Active Directory identity information. Let's look at that. And so this is your source app active directory. This is a great source. If you have that already indexed, most likely it's coming from a universal folder installed in your domain controllers. Usually the index, if you're using the Windows app, would be MSAD, but it could be something different, right? So we're looking for some business information about your users, right? And in here, I zoomed in on this object category, which is people. We don't care about computers, right? Because Active Directory would have users and computers. This would zoom in on just the people or the identities in Active Directory. And this could vary from customer to customer. I've seen where customers extended the schema for Active Directory. So you want to, first of all, when you explore it, I would just look at all the fields, start with that and see what we have. And I actually recommend you look at a lot of data here because the way this data is indexed can be tricky because you may have seen that user once and there is no activity. Maybe they're separated from your org or something. We want to go back as much as possible. In my lab here, we have a small Active Directory presence, so there's not much going on. But if you do have Active Directory in a large organization, you'd see thousands of events in here. And really, we're going to start here looking for this business information I was telling you about. So with a little bit of explorations, I can find out that in this case, they map the business unit to the description field, and it can be like that. They may use existing fields, or they may use new fields that they extended. There are fields exist in the records, like department, that's already in there, that didn't need to be extended. It's already called department. That's the company, and we're actually use this like an example or for demo purposes, and that's what we're going to be using to explain to you how to build this business hierarchy for this organization, right? Here's their name in the org. There's even a field division. The division is not really used right now in apps for future usage, but it's kind of nice to have it. If you have it, just set it up, and it's not really in use at the moment. We were thinking about using like another layer from business unit goes to division, from division to department, and from department to users and their workload. So nice to have. If you have it, if you don't worry about it. The app will populate it with the business unit, and you wouldn't worry even if you left it blank. It's not a big deal. Here I found their email address, and here's their name in the organization. And then really we want to find a user that matches what how they log into Splunk, right? So that's very important. So you can go to settings users to see how that's done, right? That's easy enough to do. And you want to find a field in Active Directory that maps to that user. Usually, sometimes it's even an employee number. It could be an email address that's very popular. It's based on how you configured SAML in Splunk, really. So in this case, it's just the short name or for users. This is an example that we have in a lab environment. These are, by the way, in this case, we actually define the service accounts in there, which is kind of important. If you sometimes they exist in Active Directory, they might be in a different OU. We can actually use that OU to zoom in on different things, and like service accounts or admin accounts that you can use to build that custom table. So when I did this, I basically found that I need kind of some cleanup to this manager. So this job kind of does that for you, for the manager. And then just kind of like see an equal in there. And then if I just zoom in on these fields, I rename, and we just need to rename, like it shows here in the template. We're looking for these fields here. We just need to, whatever we have, right? It doesn't have to be all of them. The minimum requirement is we got to have a business unit, a business department, and the username so we can tie it to username in Splunk. Their type, service account or employee, really awesome to have. And I really also like the status. Maybe if you find that status, it could be somebody that is separated, right, from your org. And we want to have that so we can flag these jobs and workload. Maybe we can shut it off. Maybe it's unnecessary, right? So if I show you how this looks like at the bottom here, this would be an example. Here's my user, here's the business unit, here's the department, their name. I don't have anything for type and status really because it's not filled, but most of the time it is, and I've seen it filled at the customer site. In my lab, it's empty because I didn't populate that field at all. Their title in organization, nice to have. Maybe they're a data scientist, and we want to identify these type of users, right? So we can figure out. Sometimes we see heavy usage, and no wonder, it's a data scientist. That kind of it's important information to have, right? Email, if you have managers and their manager ID would be great to have. So if this actually works for you as is, right, and say the index was MSAD, just make some little bit adjustments. And if you have more fields to map, you can actually, like I said, go back and look at all the fields and then basically come back here and finish the search. And then when you're done, just table them at the bottom and look for somebody right? So I like to actually use 3 different levels. So I can like to say, show me users. So for example, myself, right? ACOM I want to see, I would want to see maybe Ava, and I want to see, I have a user called Andrew, right? So think of this, myself, my manager, and my manager's manager. If I have a direct report, sure, I'll add that in there, right? So this way I can test to see if we got the business unit and information correctly, right? If we got that and we got that right or not. Sorry. All right. So oh, because I have it in a different index. So once you adjust the index here, redo. Okay. So once you configure this search, and it looks like it's going to work for you, um, and you know what index this data in, there's the source type and all that good information. You map the fields. In my case, it's in app msadmon. Then what I like to do here at the bottom, I like to search for myself, ACOMIS, and then maybe my manager. I'm just gonna pretend Ava is my manager here, and Andrew is Ava's manager. Okay, and Amelia happens to work for me. Okay, so you can have yourself, your manager, your manager's manager, and maybe a report, somebody that reports to you. And the reason for this is so we can see, did we get the hierarchy correct, right? So we all fall, well, we didn't find information about ACOMIS here. That's okay, but it might be something wrong with the data, right? We need to figure out what happened, right? But at least you get an idea here. Most likely they need to be in the same business unit, right? That's the highest level in the business. We need to basically um, see at least some kind of uniform business unit information about this hierarchy here, right? Sometimes it's different. It's okay, but you just have to find the right business unit to use, and often I actually like to fabricate the business unit. Okay, so let me show you how I do that, right? So first, before I show you that, say you've done with this search and it looks good, make sure you set your time here to as much as possible, at least 90 days for Active Directory. Sometimes even I would look at a year. Don't worry too much because this source type doesn't have, it's not like a huge source type. It's just one of our smallest source types. So I won't worry about it. It should be super fast search as long as you set the index and you're using the source type. And we zoomed in on just the users. This is a very fast search. Then you would take it after you customize it, and you drop it here, basically, right? This is your custom identity job that you're building, which is in, if you remember here, this is step one, right? So you open that up, you replace the make results, you see the instructions in here, you basically did this part here, right? And I would actually I would just take the upper portion here, not everything, just take the upper portion and replace from here all the way down to here, right? Because remember, this is just an example. If you have all the information about users, which are all of these fields, sure, fill them up, customize it, and then come in here and paste that search when it's ready. Okay, and that's really it at this point, right? That's all you need to do. You make sure down at the bottom it's producing data, right? So it has to produce data at the bottom, and it should. Here we have users and their business unit information, right? And it looks good. And I have as many fields filled as possible, right? I'm missing here the manager ID, etc., right? So, but um, say we have a scenario where we didn't get this right for a particular group of users. For example, let's say this was wrong. He's not in information security, right? So we can actually use any field in the data. Sometimes the department. The department can be a great place to actually determine if we need to actually fix the data or not. So you would build something like this. You see this eval on line 15 here. You have a case statement. You say, we can say if the business unit, this is case insensitive, contains business unit 1, 2, 3, you want to create either a new business unit, a new term here, like global information security. You need to be consistent and is case sensitive, or an existing one. And sometimes there's bad data, so bad data entry. So sometimes this can be misspelled. So this is an opportunity for you to fix that data. So I really like to have something like that always when I set up my business hierarchy, just to make sure everything's good. Now, we're setting up the business unit here. Well, this is another example here. You're going to need to do something like that, right? Not exactly this, but something like that. Here's an example. If the department is 1, 2, 3, this will be the business unit. Or if the department is in a list of items, they have to be like that, A, B, C, X, Y, Z, surrounded with double quotes between parentheses. This is what the business unit will be. And this means if you didn't, anything else, or the default would be whatever we found in the system, right? So that would default back to what we found in Active Directory in this case. So this would be a great place for you guys to do that. And this is a great example for you to use. And often we have to do that. So after you've done working on this table, on this job here, you would run it once and save it. Yeah, that's all you have to do. Then if we go back here, there's step 2 and 3. So what is really step 2 here? So say you install this in Splunk Cloud on your search cluster, right? This is going to be, this will actually extract the users from that search head, and it's going to store them in the summary index, in the chargeback summary index. That's all it's doing. And so we're basically harvesting all users defined in the system. That's what it's doing here. And so, and we need to do that first. And if you have like ES or ITSI, then you will need to follow the manual. We actually need to run a job exactly like that, similar to this, without the macros on the ES and ITSI search head or any other remote search head that you have. And so the instructions will be in here. In the document, kind of this is step 7 here. You need to log in to every standalone search head, create a job. There's the name of the job. That's the schedule you're going to be using. It's going to run once a day. And just make sure here, if you didn't use this as your index, just update it, right? Update the index name appropriately. If you don't want to copy this from here, it actually also exists in the repository itself. So it's one of the examples in here, right? So so once you've done that, once you run this on your wherever you install this app, most likely your search cluster in cloud or on-prem, or if you're a Splunk Enterprise customer, it could have been in one of your ad hoc search heads in the environment. And step 2 can also run on a monitoring console for enterprise customers, right? So that's a great place because the monitoring console sees all search heads, so we can actually pull these identities very quickly from that monitoring console. Now, the third step is going to put everything together like a puzzle. So it's going to go and see everything that we summarized to that index from all of your searches, ES, ITSI, and the search cluster as an example. It's going to pull them, and it's going to iterate through them, and it's going to basically populate the business information based on the what you built in step 1. So once you think you have done that successfully, we need to test it. And so yeah, I would click on always I use this dry run to test my data. So for example, I would launch that, right? And this is the actual macro that has all of the enrichment principles defined in it. Let me just show it to you really quick. So in the overview, under app setup screen, This is, by the way, where you actually configure your organization name here. Just make sure you keep the double quotes around it. If you want to change the currency, you can do that here. This is the index configuration in case you use a different index, right? Advanced configuration, you click on advanced, and this is where you see this macro, right? It matches this one, right? Exactly this one. What this macro is, really, this is your the order, the enrichment principal order. So if you remember here from what we talked about earlier, right? Users run first and manager roles and apps, right? Here we go. User, manager, roles, apps, and it goes on. I'm going to go and show you the additional principles after we're done talking about this. So this is where this macro actually exists. And each one of these are actually a macro, right? So this would actually get the business information about users using the user field. This will get it using the manager field, etc., etc. So when I go to the dry run here, I want to look for these two fields. These are very important, right? So I usually add them to the list of interested fields and just look at them, right? So let me just show you a problem of what we don't want to have, right? So we don't want to have no fields, right? They will not show up at all, right? Even if we come in here, they won't show up, right? So definitely we're not ready yet. And so once we have some of these tables set up, we should start seeing these populating. And that's my goal here, is to see this wonderful picture here. So in the example of the t-shirt company, they had 5 business units, okay? And that's how they do chargeback, that's how they do showback. These are the 5 business units that are accountable and ultimately responsible for sharing the cost of Splunk Cloud. In the example of t-shirt company, they are a Splunk Cloud customer. So really, that's my goal. Obviously, it's a lab environment, so I'm able to perfect it, but this is not always true. Even if you get 60, 70% of the events mapping here, that's actually great, a great start. It's not bad. Don't feel bad about that. It's okay, because we're going to use more principles to help you out, right? But it's important for you to kind of analyze this. Do I have too many? If you have too many, there's something wrong, right? We need to have it at the right level. They should be more like a 10 or a dozen, sometimes even under 10 business units. It shouldn't be hundreds of them, right? These are just the highest level of the business. These are the businesses using and utilizing and benefiting from Splunk Cloud. This is not all of the business units in your organization, okay? And many customers make that mistake, right? This is just a small list, and normally there's just a few of them, right? So we want to have the right level here. And departments, you can have drill downs at the departments. Okay, you may have hundreds of departments underneath these 6 or 7 business units, and that's actually very much true. It's in many cases you would have that situation, right? So and then as you're in the dry run, as you're here, now you want to go back and say, all right, what other principles I need to work on, right? So say you want to work in the app to business unit. So if you open this table, you'll see that I pre-populated this table with app names that I want to use for classification. Okay, how did I do that? Okay, so there's a couple of ways you can do it. You can actually do it in a dry run here. There's instructions on how to do it. So you would basically copy this macro here, and you just drop it at the bottom with a pipe behind it, just like that. And I would usually say, I want to find all apps in the last 7 days. That would be great to look at a lot of data in this case. And this once this search finishes, it will populate this table with the app names, and this obviously will be empty in here, and which you would have to go in and fill in. And usually apps that you know for sure that belong to particular business units, I mean, they don't change really, because that's, it may have a convention or naming convention, etc. And remember, you can use wildcards. right? So you containing surrounded by wildcards, here's some ending with star something, or it could be something, a star beginning with, right? So you can use wildcards in case you have a naming convention you want to use. This percent ownership here is important. So you can actually have one app split by, again, by two different business units, 50-50, and that's where this comes handy, right? If you want to do that. I don't recommend you do it day one, right? Maybe later, right? I would stick with the apps you know that belong to that to a business unit you know for sure it maps to. Now, what business units you use here is also important. That's why that first job was critical, because that Active Directory data is going to be my dictionary, right? So whatever comes out here is basically what I'm going to be using in the rest of the tables. So I have 5 business units to work with here, and I have 21 departments together. I could have wrote a search like this, right? Stats values of business department by business unit, just to see the combination permutation of what we have here, right? Here we go. We got a nice list here that we can use. Sometimes I might want to say I want to see the users in them, right? So you can do that. Values of user, just to see what users in there. Sometimes I like to count the users, right, as number of users to see, how many exist in each business unit, just to get an idea, et cetera, right? So you can actually do something like that just to see what hierarchy you have in place based on that initial job that we set up with the 3 steps process. So we're going to use this our dictionary. We're going to come back here and populate this table as much as we can. If you don't know what it is, leave it blank. So say I don't know what this is, don't put anything in there. You can leave it in there. You can remove it from here. I kind of like to keep it because this macro I showed you would add it back in, right? So really, just don't worry about it. Just keep it in there. Leave it blank if you think it's shared. For example, the search app, we're never gonna not touch it, right? We're never gonna put anything because it's usually shared by many business units. Launcher, same way, right? All of these landing pages that many business units use, don't just leave them blank. We'll find another principle to tie that usage. Um, by the way, because these tables are important, we back them up once a day, right? So here's where the app jobs are, right? And in the setup screen here, if you're a Splunk Cloud customer, right, there would be 7 jobs that you schedule, and one of them is actually will run the backup. So you get the idea here. So we can basically we do a little bit of enrichment. Now, if you update these tables, right, you need to give it some time, 5 to 10 minutes before you're tested, right? So when you come back to the dry run here, you might not see the information available immediately. And the reason for that, because we actually have these tables a part of the bundle. Okay, so the bundle replication happens every 10 minutes. You have to be a little patient with it. So if you still don't see it, just wait 5 minutes, maybe up to 10 minutes, and then you'll be able to run the search and test your data. If you want to see more examples on dry runs, there's actually more of them. And that's if you want to change the priority, right? So I'm going to go back and check on all. I can actually use this universal search if I want to look for dry run, right? I can just type dry run like that. And here's the examples that I have. So I want to, if you want to do, try any of them, they just give some different examples and how you can actually change the priorities. In fact, there's a diagram here at the bottom to give you an example of how these do work, right? So this example here, this is very detailed, right? Starts with the dashboard, the jobs that a user may run or schedule jobs under a user. Then we go to the user and see what business unit they belong to. From here, we go to the manager. From manager, we go to the role in Splunk apps and search heads, right? So, and then you have other examples here. Here's another one. It's very simple here. We got the job, the user, the app, and search heads. Yeah, sometimes that's all you need, really. 3, maybe 4 of them. You don't have to use every one of them to build your business hierarchy. Just use the right mix, right? And you have other examples here if you have ITSI, etc. So the goal is to basically configure these tables to the best of your ability. And I didn't talk about the rest of them, right? But they're right underneath here. Similarly, jobs, why would I want to do jobs? Say you have an expensive data model being accelerated that belongs to a business unit and is sitting in a search app. Really terrible place for it, right? But that's all, you have to live with that, right? So you just pop it in here, add it into the job to business unit. I'll show you an example. And basically, come in here and classify it. Same thing, all these tables have a naming convention. And they ship with examples too, so you can see how to use them. Again, every one of these principles would have a search in the search repository, right? So you have examples, or what I showed you earlier, you can actually use these macros to fill these tables very quickly. I love this because I'm in a dry run anyway. Just boom, drop that in, 7 days, populate some jobs. And what this does, that's why it's important to build the users first, because what it's going to do, I'm going to populate the jobs that we still have no information about, right? So if I know what they are because they belong to this user that I have already in my user database, I'm done, right? I don't have to worry about this job, right? And we don't want to have hundreds of records in these tables, except the app. You might have to. In that case, you probably, if you have a naming convention, you have hundreds of apps. In that situation, sure. But really, I would say 10, 15 records is what I mostly see here, not more than that. And jobs will probably be just go after the expensive ones, right? Another good way I want to show you here is as you're working here, you can just use this. Where is null business unit? I love to use this all the time, right? You can do that, run that, and then analyze the apps, the jobs, the search hits that are still empty, right? In this case, I can't do much, but here's this app, Search Analyzer, right? Maybe I can use it. I can put it in my app to business unit table, and I classify it, right? This system, I wouldn't touch it, or the search app, I wouldn't touch it, right? I may be able to say a provenance, that would be one of the custom tables, but say I want to use the job itself. Here we go. So this is a report acceleration. I just know it from the way it looks. That's magic number. So reports always accelerated using the Splunk system user, right? So even though they're owned by a different user, they will always run or accelerate using user nobody or the Splunk system user. So I can just pop this into the job to business unit table, or use the app. In rare cases, I really like to stay away from roles. But if I see a role not used for index permissions, right, access to indexes, I may want to do that. And the search head itself, right? So kind of very important. The search head, if you have ES, most likely you want to pop in one entry in here. That's it. Just want to have one entry in this table, and it would just be that ES search head. So I'm just going to show you that example. So I'm going to actually remove everything in here. This is how you would do it. ES. In the case of the Splunk t-shirt company, it was Global Information Security. Okay, so because I'm at in the order, this is 7. So I still don't know the usages, right? But I can assume the rest of it belongs to the global information security, whatever that is in your, it can be called cybersecurity. Every organization would call it something different. It always has security in the name though, right? So you want to put that in, and I actually match the division and department to it. It's okay, no problem. If you don't know the division or the department, just map in, just populate this information, or even Brank, the app will do it for you nightly. If it finds any of these fields empty, it will populate it with the information that found in the business unit. That's really all you have to do for the ES search is just one record, right? I didn't have to create many here. That's all I need. Nothing else is needed. We don't want to put in a search cluster. We don't want to put anything else, just that ES search, right? And that would help me tremendously, especially because ES with data boundary accelerations, most of the heavy duty stuff is going to run on a Splunk system user. And that is not in your human capital management. This is a Splunk user, it's like a system user or a service account. It's very, very difficult to figure out what belongs to it. But since it is the enterprise security search head, we can assume or default or catch all of that additional usage that we still don't know and tie it or classify it against that global information security um, business unit. If you have ITSI, you can try these too. These are new. And if you want to do something custom, you have some fields in there, maybe a weird name, the title, you can use any field you want. You can use even an email address, right? The dashboard is great here. If you find a very heavy dashboard in its search app, you can use this, right, to classify it, right? You can actually, and you can see this. Here's one of the app dashboards, right? So in this case, it would be a provenance, the dashboard name, and who it belongs to. It's simple enough, right? How do I know the dashboard name? It's right there, by the way. If you launch any dashboard, if I launch the Showback dashboard, they will be right there. You see, right there would be the dashboard at the top in the URL. I'll grab it. I'll go to that lookup here, to that uh, uh, custom bid to business unit lookup, and I'll paste it in here, right? And that would be the object I'm looking for here. So it's more like a Swiss Army knife. You can use it to classify using any other field. I had to use this at a customer site. This was a weird search I would run frequently, and so I use the search string. If it's this, I actually associated with a special business unit using Splunk. So let me talk to you about that Splunk special business unit. If you're a Splunk Cloud customer, right, we want this to be used only with what the app defaults to, right? Nothing else, right? So the app would ship with, for example, some users, they begin with internal underscore, and there's one called INT underscore magic number. These are created every time you open a support ticket and somebody needs to access your stack to help you with something. So they will be in the table here, right? Just leave them and they will have the Splunk business unit associated with them, right? So you'd leave them alone. These are special for the scenario I just told you. And that usage is just for the health and monitoring of the stack too, right? So we don't bill anybody. We don't charge you for it if you're a Splunk Cloud customer. This is just what is necessary to run the stack, right? So and then once you actually have, use the dry run and you think we're looking good, right? So you come in here and you think you're good. Now would be a good time to start summarizing data. Okay, so you go back to the setup screen. Okay, you come down to Splunk Cloud Setup here, you'd see that, and then you'd enable the jobs just like so. You click on them. I would enable all of them, and then click Save. That's it. And now would start summarizing data, right? And then a day after, you need to give it some time, like sometimes a couple of days. Come back and start checking the executive dashboard, right? And so the executive dashboard is probably where you should start, right? And this would have a breakdown of usage at the business unit. It would have information about their SVC usage, how much the ingestion for the day we're looking at. This looks always defaults to yesterday because it's a full day that already happened in the past. How much their storage, how much storage they have for all of their indexes, how much archive storage they're using, and if I can drill down and see their departments and how much they use. Now, we didn't talk about the index of business, and this is where we're going to finish talking about that. That's probably going to be very important for this dashboard and the storage dashboard, right? So how do you do that? It's a table in here, right? So it's right here, but it's a little bit special, okay? I kind of like to launch the storage dashboard first. You can actually access the table from there. So you can see what indexes you have, right? First of all, it's going to show you ingestion for all the indexes that you have incoming data going to them. You just give it a minute to populate here. And I kind of like to come in here and use these pie charts. I want to look at indexes, right? And really here, what we're after, we want to have all of these indexes classified. However, we have this option here that we can actually share an index. Let me show you how that works. So we have access to open this table, index to business unit from here. And if I wanted to say for example, you have a particular index called Akamai, right? This index shared by 2 business units or 3 business units. You create 3 lines in the table, and then you set the business unit like so, right? The department, if you know the department, otherwise just copy paste the business unit. And then their ownership, how much they actually own or are responsible for. So this here is 40, 35, 25. They must add to 100% always, right? So the app would automatically take that in consideration, and it would split it across the different business units. So when you look at them in here, you would see them, indexes that actually would have a different percent ownership other than 100, like this index as an example. And you would see, you can actually zoom in on them if you want. I want to see all the shared indexes like that. Now, because we know exactly how much we index by source type, you can also use that table if you want to. And I'm going to show you how this works, right? Similar idea. Remember, these are also wildcard lookups. So begin with, ending with, starting with, including all of that would apply, right? See, I'm using the wildcard here because source types can be long in some cases, right? And classify the information. Same idea with percent ownership if you want to split that. So basically, you build these tables, and what happens when the search runs here, it first, and I'm going to show where you can customize that. It will be in the setup screen. So if we go back to the setup screen back here, the setup screen, you will see, if I do advance, you'll see this a macro for index enrichments. And what happens here, it runs the index to business unit first. If I don't have the information in index to business unit, we can go after the source type to business unit table. You can shuffle that if you want. You can make the source type run first. Kind of makes more sense to run the index first, and then anything left, I can use the source type as a kind of ad hoc to fix any mistakes that we couldn't figure out because that index, we just don't have a good way to split that usage across business units. But we know at the source type level, so we can use that to help us out. So you can use a combination of these two different tables. And ideally, you want all of these, the business unit, to be populated. If you see undefined, that means you still have more work to do for your business to business unit, right? Information. That's really, but sometimes customers want the more like examples, right? And how to build these tables. So for index to business unit, you would have a lot of examples in here, because in a scenario where you want to calculate the percent ownership based on a particular say use case. So this one here looks at AWS accounts, right? And you know the account, what business unit it belongs to, but you want to try to figure out, well, how much they actually own from that index. So you can use these anywhere you see ownership. These are a good example if you're trying to figure out that percent ownership programmatically or using search. You can use that to help you out, right? So you can get going, right? So others like this one here would just generate a list for you to classify, right? This would be more like I want to know the list, and I want to know also what percent ownership each one of the business units are responsible for.